some countries like Canada a hair's breadth away from Poland in 1972.
The mandates were so cruel, really, and so awful for a lot of people. I mean, we've got people who have lost livelihoods.
Can we expect house prices to come down anytime soon?
Unfortunately, I don't see that happening.
Hello and welcome to the Aussie Wire News. I don't have an editorial for you today. In fact, starting this week, I'll be doing my editorials only on the Tuesday episodes. Why? Well, I'm trying to carve out time in my week to be able to give you more and better content than ever before, and something had to give. The Slow Chats returned last week, you may recall. I had intended for those to be monthly, but silly me, I've actually scheduled another one for tonight. I'm glad I did though, because I'm slow chatting with Melisa Albisetti. She's an Argentine national who we had recently on the Aussie Wire News talking about Javier Milei. He's the libertarian presidential candidate in Argentina who took a shock win in their Argentinian primaries and is now a frontrunner for their actual presidential election, which is coming up in October. I'll be slow chatting with Melisa tonight, talking about socialism, the realities of living in a failing economy, and why she thinks that Australia might go the same way. You can catch that on my Topher Field social media channels at 8 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. But we've also started recording special deep dive episodes of the Aussie Wire to start releasing in a few weeks' time. But yesterday we recorded one with Dr Naomi Wolf, who you will also see in this episode of the news today. The idea with deep dives is that we go deep into an issue that matters, and they're supposed to be published on YouTube on Sunday nights, starting in a few weeks' time. The trouble is that if we publish that interview that I did yesterday with Dr. Naomi Wolf, if I put that up on YouTube or on Facebook, we will be instantly banned and probably never allowed to have a social media account ever again. So we can't do that. What we're going to do instead with that particular interview is put that deep dive with Dr. Naomi Wolf up as an insider's exclusive. It'll go up onto our locals page, just for those who are financial supporters of the Aussie Wire, as a way of us saying thank you to them. So please enjoy the short interview with Dr. Naomi Wolf for free in this episode of the news. But if you want the whole thing, where we talk not only about the data that she's uncovering, but the uncomfortable conclusions that that data points to, and even have a metaphysical conversation about evil and whether the human race is returning to our old pagan ways, it gets interesting. That is for our insiders only. The link to become an insider is in the description of this video, and insiders get giveaways, discounts, exclusive content, our insiders community, and much more. And in the process, they help us to keep bringing you truth, freedom, and hope every Tuesday and Thursday in the form of these episodes of the news, which you can watch, of course, for free. Speaking of which, here is the news. Well, here at the Aussie Wire, we are committed to three basic principles: truth, freedom, and hope. But one of the realities of the world today is that we have to be very careful how and where we speak some of that truth. So if my next guest and I seem like we're perhaps dancing around issues a little bit delicately, well, it's because we are. Rest assured, though, I am also doing a deep dive with my next guest where there will be no rules, because it'll go up on Rumble and we can say what we actually believe to be true. So keep an eye out for that. But for today, we are going to have to be a little bit careful as we welcome Dr. Naomi Wolf to the Aussie Wire. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk to you again.
Hey, look, you were you were everywhere, really, for a couple of months there. People were talking about the incredible work that you're doing in researching the Pfizer papers. That's what we can't talk about today. So I thought I'd start with some hard-hitting journalism, the kind of journalism that YouTube would approve of, and say, Naomi, how's the weather where you are?
It's been muggy, but seasonable for September. Thank you, Topher.
And now that we've done the weather, let's talk about sport. How's that Novak Djokovic guy? What do you reckon?
Well, I'm awfully glad to see him, and it's nice that he's a victor. And I also am noting how, and I'll say this in a circumspect way to suit the new era we're in, it's notable how quickly legacy media forgot the vilification that he sustained not 2 full years ago, as I recall.
Well, of course, that all happened in my own home city of Melbourne, and it was an absolutely disgraceful stain on our conscience, as so much of what happened during that era was. But I do feel like Melbourne did somewhat redeem itself, because the following year, when he walked out onto centre court, he got a thunderous ovation, the like of which is rare, even in the world of elite sports. get into something a bit more serious. You're a journalist with decades of experience. You're an author. You're an incredibly influential figure in culture. So this is not new ground for you. You're very familiar with all of this territory. What do you make of the changes and the shifts that we've seen, where we have to be careful in the first place? I mean, what's happening here that this dynamic even has to exist?
Well, it's hard to talk about censorship in a condition of censorship. I guess I'd highlight what I'm about to say by noting that, and I think it's important for people to realize this because it gives them hope, but the barriers you're describing are not universal. I talk to people around the world, and some countries like Canada are, I mean, a hair's breadth away from Poland in 1972. I mean, completely almost locked down, like ideologically tyrannical regime with barely a vestige of the robust democracy, free speech, civil rights that country boasted, 3 years ago. Australia, literally gives me nightmares. Australia, New Zealand, I worry about all day long. You guys are always in my heart. And the dancing around things that we're doing, people have to do it for the same reasons, to not be canceled on some platforms, and then we get to say what we want to say on other platforms. But the penalties that are allowed in a civil society in Australia are far more severe than they've managed to establish in the United States. There are a lot of reasons for that. And I don't mean to be smug or not compassionate, but I just want to say that because I want to give hope, if I can, to the people of Australia and New Zealand that there are ways to fight this tyranny. And just because they say it has to be the case doesn't mean it has to be the case. And the last thing I really want to give some space to, if we can, is The Voice, which I've been following to some extent. And I just want to, again, subjectively, I'm not Australian, I'm not Aboriginal, obviously, but I do want to say generally that I want to tell Australians to beware, whether they're Aboriginal or not Aboriginal, be careful, be wary, because what I'm seeing around the world, and it's so clever, and I'm seeing it in the United States, is that these evildoers who want to create a global tyranny are creating wedge issues that allow them to crush civil liberties, or basically to kind of rewrite or upend the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, or whatever the Australian equivalent is, in Canada, the Charter of Rights, by playing on Western nations' guilt about, legitimate guilt about, the legitimate atrocities of colonialism or colonial oppression. So we see it with, Black Lives Matter. I'm a staunch anti-racist. Black lives do matter, but the theatrical release of Black Lives Matter, which I've seen the money flow was funded by many shell entities that were not, organic to the United States civil rights movement, was followed by defund the police. And that led to a catastrophic breakdown of safety and civil society and just livability in our cities, horribly impacting Black and brown women and children, most of all. But I guess where I'm going with this, and we see it in the schools, the kind of replacement of like algebra and history and social studies and civics with discourses about our racist past. And, we have a racist past. I don't doubt that. But what's being used is that these the fact of our racism in the past, right, is being used to erase history, to make it completely socially unacceptable to be proud of being American or Australian or a New Zealander or, French or British or whatever. And it's very convenient. And, in your case, to in a wholesale way to rewrite your laws. So it's very, very dangerous. And I just want to kind of cheer people on to remember that it is not necessarily racist. You don't have to be racist. You can be an anti-racist, still be proud of your country, still be proud of your history, acknowledge the shortcomings of all of our nations, but not be bullied into guilted into accepting a loss of everyone's civil liberties and rule of law, because these bad people want to use our issues as a Trojan horse to destroy our democracies.
As a wedge to divide us. Now, you mentioned there freedom of speech. I want to draw people's attention to an event that you're speaking at shortly that I think will be of great interest to Australians. As soon as I get a live stream link for this event, it's in Rochester, New York. I will be putting that live stream up on all of my own socials at Topher Field, as well as all the Aussie Wire socials. Dr Naomi Wolf, you're one of the speakers there. Dr Robert Malone, MD. Jeffrey Tucker, founder of the Brownstone Institute, great guy. I've interviewed him twice. He has amazing bow ties. Dr. Pierre Corey and Dr. Ryan Cole. What an incredible lineup, and a lineup unlike what we're going to see in Australia, certainly this year, for all of the reasons that we've just discussed. From your perspective, there's a big argument here in Australia around a Bill of Rights. There are limitations and flaws with the Bill of Rights. Sometimes once you write down these rights, everything not written down is then automatically excluded. It goes into the hands of courts, etc., to decide what that means. But then again, if you don't have a Bill of Rights, well, would you be able to say what you're saying without the US Bill of Rights, do you think?
Well, it worries me. I wasn't aware that there was, like, the way you just described it, I wasn't aware that things had gotten that granular. And that's, again, really scary. I mean, I have felt from the March of 2020, April of 2020, when your parliament was disbanded, and I wrote a tweet saying, can someone tell me in 130 words or less who's in charge of Australia? And I got like piled on by bots and trolls, which is a wonderful signal to a reporter that there's a story there.
Yeah.
But Australia has been, in my view, a petri dish. I said this when we last spoke, like a demo for the rest of the world. Like if they can do it to Australia, then they can export it to the rest of the world. And so I'm very worried to hear that there's a debate about your Bill of Rights, because
we don't have
there
one.
Shouldn't be a debate.
That we don't have a debate about Bill of Rights. Yeah, about actually creating one. Do you believe that the only reason you're able to do things like speak at these events alongside people like Pierre Corey and Dr. Robert Malone, et cetera, is because the First Amendment exists? Do you think you would have that right were it not for that?
Certainly. I mean, I can't overstate how important the First Amendment has been. People think it's about speech. It's not just about speech. It's literally about everything else that follows in terms of liberty. And when we're looking at, like, the lights go down in Canada, in Western Europe, in Britain, which was, the originator of the ideals of free speech and civil society, in Australia and New Zealand, it's literally only the First Amendment that allows us to do all the things that defend other liberties. For example, the First Amendment has allowed many good lawsuits that had impacts beyond speech, like taking masks off of travelers, or forbidding, taking gag orders off of doctors in Canada, or forbidding my governor here in New York State from opening a quarantine camp. You have to use speech to protect your body and your children's bodies in other ways. And I can't stress enough how important that is, which is, again, back to my point about using our racist past to oppress us. In Canada, they managed to whittle down their freedom of speech rights through hate speech legislation.
Sure.
And I was like, no, because the minute everyone can agree, yes, that's hate speech, but it's the camel's nose inside the tent, right? We all don't like hearing Nazi rhetoric. I don't like it. I'm the granddaughter of a woman who lost 9 siblings to the Nazis, but the ultimate goal is what Jews did in marching for the right of Nazis in Skokie, Illinois, to have speech, because Jews understood that if, we have to hear speech we don't like in order for everyone's rights to be protected. So I'm really interested that you're having a Bill of Rights discussion. I'm worried, again, I'm always worried about it. I'm worried that they'll create a Bill of Rights that is actually diminishes your rights, because that's where everything's gone so far. Yeah. And the last thing I want to say about what I'm worried about, and I'm sorry to talk so much about this, but as I said, I'm so preoccupied with Australia. And so what you're telling me is, like, really important to me and dear to my heart. In our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, it says that all the rights that are not enumerated go back to the states. So basically, every right, you have every right. And the Bill of Rights carves out specific rights that are enumerated federal level. If your Bill of Rights doesn't say everything that's not enumerated here goes back to the equivalent of the states in Australia, it's a bad proposal.
All right,
you shouldn't be told, everything that's in the Bill of Rights are all the rights you're going to get. It doesn't work that way.
It has to work the other way.
In a free society.
That's food for thought. Thank you so much, Dr. Wolf. Thank you for your work. We're going to sign off from this recording. We're going to hit record again, and we're going to talk all about the things that we can't talk about. That will go up as soon as possible into the insiders. So those of you that are Aussie Wire insiders, don't worry, you'll get that pretty much straight away. And for everybody else, we're going to figure out where we can release that, where we're not going to get ourselves penalised, and we'll let you know where to find that in the coming weeks once that goes up. Dr. Wolf, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Well, there were many important stories that needed to be told out of the COVID era, and one that we haven't heard a lot here in Australia is the story of what happened in New Zealand. And after my very inappropriate joke about New Zealanders last week, which a lot of you got in touch to tell me was very, very bad, unfortunately, I feel the need to make amends now. And so I thought, you know what, how better to do that than to bring on someone who's done a wonderful job of helping to tell the New Zealanders' story, particularly around the protests that happened in Wellington, something that honestly most Australians know next to nothing about. My next guest is Gaylene Barnes. Thank you, Gaylene, so much for coming on the Aussie Wire. Congratulations on directing this documentary. It is in cinemas. Tell me a little bit about it. What's the story?
Well, it's a story about the convoy that all of New Zealanders took to Parliament to protest the vaccine mandates and other COVID restrictions, and our fundamental freedoms in terms of the Bill of Rights and a number of other things. And so it took 2 days to get to Parliament, and then we stayed there for a couple of days. The police tried to move the people, and they failed. And then basically what happened is a self-sufficient campsite, Freedom Village evolved, and they were there for 23 days.
Yeah, wow.
And then on the 2nd of March, the people were smashed off by the police.
Yeah, look, it's something that a lot of Australians, particularly Victorians, are very, very familiar with those experiences and those sorts of things. I have here the trailer for the River of Freedom documentary. Let's watch this.
My role in my own heart, and the reason why I was there, is that I needed to speak the truth.
I had to educate myself. Personally, I'm pro-vaccination, but having to sack people because they don't take a vaccination is, in my book, just immoral.
Like a river that is flowing, where you know.
This is the world that we're in now. You better toe the line, but we wouldn't.
I need to do this. I feel so strongly about it. But I'm proud of what I did and what I fought for.
The Wellington protest was that light. It gave me that faith back that maybe we don't have to go down that dark road.
This was where our pa was. I just wanted to get one night on the whenua, and if we had got through that, I was happy.
If the politicians of New Zealand think that these little games that they're playing against us, up against some of the most resourceful people in New Zealand, they're dreaming.
Give them an umbrella! I think I understood because I listened. Your job as a politician is to represent the people.
This leadership group had a person offered to negotiate. I just assumed the government would behave reasonably.
If democracy is a conversation and politicians don't want to have the conversation, what are we all doing here?
Be calm, everyone. Peace and love.
How can you be an anti-vaxxer when you had a vaccine? Like you did it, right? You're not an anti-vaxxer, you're an injured person.
We'd already been bullied out of everything else. I didn't have anything else to lose.
Made me cry every day they didn't come.
Where's your money?
Now
Well, that certainly gets me right in the feels, and I've never seen that footage until I discovered your film, and yet it all feels eerily familiar, of course, and very reminiscent of some of what we saw in Victoria. What's the reception to your film been like so far, Gaylene?
Well, we released it a week ago on the 7th of September. We had 3 premieres, which were pretty much sold out. We had over 2,000 tickets sold for the 3 premieres. We premiered in Auckland, Christchurch and Wellington. People were, we've just had incredible reviews from that. Hundreds of people grateful, thankful that we're telling the story, that they're heard, that they're just, that their story is being presented, because we haven't really had an opportunity in the mainstream to express why we were there, why the protesters were there, what their goals were. So I think there's been just a bit of relief, actually. And then we're released it into cinemas. So we initially started with 2 or 3 really supportive cinemas, and then they have just been sold out. And we've now got about 30 cinemas, and every day we get more cinemas coming online. It's doing well in the box office, let's say that. And that was what my hope is that it actually just travels New Zealand and it reaches it out to the wider community, so that people who probably weren't aware, who didn't know what was going on, can also just come in and buy an ice cream, sit in the dark, and
well, this is the
get an
thing.
idea.
This is the thing. If the situation there is anything like it is here in Australia, there'd be an awful lot of New Zealanders that genuinely have no idea what happened, let alone why. Are you finding a lot of people that necessarily that aren't necessarily on your side, let's say, are coming out to see it and are curious to understand your side of that story?
Absolutely, yeah. I think there was, a lot of fear and a lot of over-the-top promotion by the media, and people who aren't, maybe they don't go online so much, or they're not aware of that it is a bit of a bubble. They're sort of saying, "Oh, I had no idea that the mandates were so cruel, really, and so awful for a lot of people." I mean, we've got people who have lost livelihoods, people who are still struggling to rebuild their lives again, who don't want to go back to their jobs, who are injured. And this is a real thing. These are real people's lives. And I don't understand why the media haven't been interviewing these people themselves, because, we have hospitalizations of people with myocarditis and pericarditis. It's a real thing. So I think there's just a time for a gentle accounting to take place, and that would be awesome.
Well, Gaylene, congratulations on the film. Congratulations on the success that it is enjoying right now in cinemas. People can go to riveroffreedom.nz to find out. I'm assuming that they can find out where all the showings are there as your showings expand around New Zealand. Are there plans to come to Australia?
Yeah. We've got a screenings page there, and it says New Zealand. We've had a lot of interest from Australia, so we're just starting to put out feelers there now. We've also starting to get invites from festivals.
Yeah, amazing.
So that's pretty exciting, because we were a little bit ignored and cancelled.
Yes.
And I think people are looking at it now and going, oh, it's not so bad. It's just people's lived experience. I'm sure we can cope,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, certainly my own documentary about what happened in Melbourne, Battleground Melbourne, was not well received. We've been rejected from every single Australian festival bar one, and yet we're winning awards all over the world in international festivals. So it's quite interesting. It's a very cold reception here.
Yeah.
A little bit more time has passed, and I really hope that attitudes are softening. I wish you every success. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
If your film does come to Australia, please reach out. I'd love to promote it for you.
Okay, we will. Thank you so much.
All the best. Well, housing affordability is a topic we've been talking about a lot here, and one that is not going to go away anytime soon, no matter how much we may wish it were otherwise. In fact, if anything, I'm sorry to say, the indicators appear to be moving in the wrong direction. And here to help me understand what's going on with the data is Edwena Dixon, Senior Mortgage Broker with Pinpoint Finance. Edwena, thank you for joining us on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you for having me.
What's this data telling you? You've been looking at the ABS data. Can we expect house prices to come down anytime soon?
Unfortunately, I don't see that happening. It certainly looks like the indications are that the cost of housing is actually going to continue to rise, and affordability is going to become harder even still for people. What we are seeing from the ABS is that approvals for new construction, they're very low, and they're actually at the point where they're as low as what they were back in 2013, which is incredibly low and is a bit of a concern. The other thing that we're also seeing is the value of the cost of construction. So the cost to actually build a new home has increased to the highest we've ever seen.
Yeah, so simultaneously, what this data here is showing us the number of approvals is way down, but the actual value of those approvals is way up. This is a concern. Traditionally, Edwena, what we've seen is new builds have been where, let's say, migrant communities or first home buyers or these sorts of people can get into the market. This is where it's more affordable than established dwellings that might be in more premium locations. This is going to put a lot of pressure, is it not, particularly in the context of an Australia with a very large immigration strategy?
Yes, it does mean that what will happen is more people will actually have to find other avenues for housing. It means that we might see an increase in multi-generational living starting to happen. It also means that the ability to be able to receive home loan approval, those things are also going to be dramatically diminished, and a lot of the property that was open and was encouraged to be purchased by first home buyers, by immigrants, is actually being taken off the table, and they're going to have to look at other avenues to be able to find somewhere to live.
So this was data that, again, you drew to my attention. This is can you talk us through this? This is the established house values, I believe?
Yeah, so this data that you're looking at the moment, this is what we're seeing as the median value of housing in the country and how it's actually just continued to increase. What we're then seeing is, with the implication of low construction approvals and the increase in the value of construction, it's really just going to continue to push property prices up even further, because as I think many of your viewers perhaps are aware, it's a supply and demand issue. And if there are less people that are able to afford to get approvals to build construction at that higher value, but we have more people looking for property to purchase, it's just going to push the value of property up even higher.
And in that data there, we can see the annual returns are actually negative for a number of states. But if you just look at the last quarter, it reverts back to being positive, indicating that the increase in construction values is now starting to affect established dwellings as well. And we're beginning to see that climb kick back in. Well, it makes for grim reading. Do you have any ideas, tips? What can people do to try and manage their own cost of housing? You're a mortgage broker. You help people do this all the time.
A big part of what we're seeing and what we're certainly encouraging our clients to do is to take the time to do one of those really tedious tasks, but to actually sit down and go through your budget and work out exactly what it is that you're spending your money on, whether you have enough income coming through, whether you need to make adjustments to what you're actually spending money on, or perhaps you need to be looking at a new job, or perhaps changing some other factors within your life based on what that budget says. What we're also encouraging our clients to do is not only do a budget for right now, for their current situation, but also to complete a budget that really looks at what could their situation look like in another, say, 6 months' time, especially if more rate rises do come through, so that they can best prepare for those now.
Yeah, it's not a pretty picture. I don't like bad news stories, but I can't help but feel that this story has a long way to run, and it's not going to be pretty. Edwena Dixon from Pinpoint Finance, thank you so much for joining us on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching the Aussie Wire News. If you'd like to see the 40-minute deep dive with Dr Naomi Wolf, you'll need to become an Aussie Wire insider. The link for that is in the description. We release new episodes of the Aussie Wire News every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. You can catch up on past episodes at theaussiewire.com, follow all our various social media channels via @theaussiewire, and join our email list so that we can still keep in touch even if we get cancelled. I'm Topher Field, and this is the Aussie Wire.